Hello, Reverend. Can you hear me now? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Okay, great. I think your sound is working, just nobody is speaking yet. And I just want to make sure I have your last name correct. Gorman Coombs?
Yes.
Great. Thank you so much for being here and for the service you're providing.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hi, Gary.
Good afternoon. This is Miss Rembert. How you doing there, Mayor?
Very good. And yourself?
Oh, blessed and highly favored as always. Thank you for my beautiful card.
More than welcome.
Hi, Mayor.
Hello.
Good evening, everyone.
Chief, anybody?
Okay, Mayor, whenever you're ready, we'll get started.
Okay, I just generally want to thank everyone for being here tonight, and then also the time and effort that has been put in to bring us here tonight. And again, we're now starting to get down to the sum and substance of this undertaking. And I appreciate, again, everyone's patience, their input, and really looking forward to discussion not only tonight, but going forward. And I now really want to thank Jason Benitez, who's agreed to be our moderator. Jason's taking on this yeoman's task of trying to keep us all in line, moving ahead, and it's potential because there's some areas here of conflict. There's some difficult conversations we're going to have. Maybe some humor, hopefully some good things too. And I appreciate, Jason, again, your willingness to shepherd all this and guide us down this path for what I'll call path of progress and making the community a better place to live and work and just be part of. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jason Benitez, our great moderator.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And good evening, everybody. For those who might not have been on last night's call, I'm just going to kind of go over my opening statement from last night because I really want to make sure for those who might not have caught it that they really get to hear just that opening. So my name is Jason Benitez, and I currently serve as the Vice President of Talent and Inclusion for the Capital Region Chamber. I humbly come to this group and the work that it is charged to do with the best of intentions and a sincere willingness to do what we can to produce meaningful, needed change. A little bit about me. I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and attended the University at Albany for both my undergraduate and graduate work in sociology and educational administration. Before joining the Capital Region Chamber last year, I worked 15 plus years in higher ed at 3 local institutions, UAlbany, SUNY Schenectady, and most recently, Union College. My roles, particularly while at Union College, were expressly tasked with fostering a more diverse and inclusive environment for all students, and quite often involved mediating and facilitating some difficult conversations. I am here in a role as a moderator, and as such, it is my responsibility, one that I am taking very seriously, to ensure that these conversations are as authentic as possible while also constructive and productive. The executive order given by Governor Cuomo and the subsequent task forces that have been created are a public acknowledgement that there are issues and problems in the areas of policing policies, practices, and procedures that need to improve, particularly when it comes to addressing disparities that affect communities of color. We are here to move the governor's executive order mandate forward. This must involve the process of collectively taking a deep look at what conversations and actions need to happen to work toward better outcomes. The issues facing our communities are multi-layered and will certainly require a robust set of holistic solutions for betterment. Racial disparities in regard to policing are the focus at the moment, though we are sure that other underlying issues will naturally enter the conversations. We are hopeful that this effort will lead to policy suggestions with community input, and that those policy changes will be adopted to make these issues better. As we enter the phase of community conversations, we have attempted to include as many stakeholders as possible and believe that we will hear from individuals who are fairly representative of the community and their perspectives. This task force and these community conversations will be an opportunity for us to center the diverse voices in the community in a way that policy crafters and decision makers will listen and respond to. And it won't be easy and will be likely uncomfortable at times, but in order for us to make substantial policy change, we need to be able to work through differing opinions, approaches, and personalities. We have to be willing to listen to how people feel. We cannot shy away from the emotion and at times trauma that may have been expressed through these sessions, that may be expressed through these sessions. Um, we have to be willing to let individuals be the experts of their own lived experiences. For example, while I identify as a person of color, a Latino male, I am aware that I do not walk in the world and present to people as Black. I can try to learn and empathize, but I will never really know what living in Black skin is like. I am aware of and admit that I am skin privileged in that way. A wise colleague recently shared with me that they only know what they know about people because they are willing to have conversations with diverse people. And I sometimes wonder the homogenous circles that we can often function in and how that can be somewhat limiting to our perspectives and experiences, particularly where empathy is needed in trying to see an issue from another person's point of view. I'd like to close by stating that we are all individuals, but these issues are systemic with generations of chapters to this story. No one task force or community conversation will be able to undo the full and at times dark history of the disparities we spoke of earlier. But here we find ourselves nonetheless. Our hope is that these conversations and the work of the task force can be just the beginning steps to building and repairing trust between the police force and the diverse members of the community they serve. Many of you in the community on this call, and I've seen the list, know me and what I stand for and what I represent. I would not have agreed to participate in this process if I did not believe that we have an opportunity here to actively listen to each other and hopefully learn from the mistakes that have been previously made. I choose to stay engaged and encourage others to do the same. And the fact is that if we can truly come together, listen to with open minds and hearts, and proactively attempt to develop empathy, I really feel that we can better these issues that we are talking about in some ways. We're not perfect. I don't have all the answers, and we're not going to be able to solve all these multifaceted issues in one meeting or even 1 year. But I am committing to staying engaged, getting involved, and coming together with the many community members who want to see and do better. So with that, I just want to do some housekeeping with you all. Again, thank you everyone who's on this call this evening. Your presence is a sheer demonstration that this issue is important to you and that you too want to be able to do something about it in some way. I did want to say that we do have, as we get into the conversation phase, we do have for emotional and spiritual support, Reverend Kathleen Gorman Coombs on the line with us tonight, and she will make herself available to anyone that may need to stay on or follow up with her for emotional, spiritual, and other support. In addition to that, if the need for support extends into tomorrow, the Schenectady County Office of Community Services have offered their support for anyone seeking assistance for mental health. Though the line is not staffed after hours, they can follow up with an individual the next morning if a message is left. And their number is 518-386-2218. Again, that's 518-386-2218, the Office of Community Services. Excuse me. A little housekeeping. I'd ask if while you're not speaking to make sure you're on mute, just for the sake of the conversation. And before I turn it over to the chief for some brief remarks, I would like to go over some of our what we're calling community conversation guidelines. I believe many of you received this via email. And if not, we can certainly get that out to you. But I'd like to go over those and mention those this evening. So I know screen share is happening, and I'll read these aloud, and hopefully these are all guidelines that we can abide by and kind of commit to foster a meaningful and productive conversation. So 1, speak your truth with care. This means that it's important to be authentic and honest, but to do so knowing that we are all in different places in our learning, and it's important to be mindful of our impact on those around us. Please, as much as possible, use I statements. Avoid making generalizations about any group or broad assumptions about they or them, and focus on speaking from your own experiences. This one I think is super important as we enter this phase, but assume positive intent. The topics we will focus on and discuss this evening are personal and challenging, and we don't all share the same language or experience. focus on assuming that everyone is doing the best they can. This is a little bit of a fun one, but don't yuck my yum. Basically means do not diminish or make fun of something that you don't like. We don't have to agree on every point this evening. One person, one mic, which means one person speaking at a time. Listen when others are talking, speak one at a time. I'd like to promote the ouch, oops policy, and that's if someone hurts your feelings in a conversation, please say ouch. And hopefully I encourage the person who made the statement to say oops. And then the two people are responsible for possibly checking in with each other after the conversation tonight to talk through what happened. Please be aware of impact versus intent, meaning sometimes you might not intend something to be one way, but the impact that it leaves on someone else is felt nonetheless. For example, if you step on my foot by accident, I know it wasn't intentional, but it still hurts if you step on my foot. Inherent power differences exist in this virtual room. We have to be aware of that. Those inherent power differences range from position to occupation to other factors, and we just need to be aware of those power dynamics that exist in the room. We're going to do our best to create an equal level playing field where everyone is listening, but I did want to at least acknowledge that, you know, there are power differences that exist. Move forward, move back. If you don't speak up often, please move forward. And if you do tend to speak up often, take the time to move back and let others speak. Also remember to try not to speak twice until everyone has spoken once. There's also a three before me rule, which is let 3 other people speak before you talk again. Listening from the heart. I really want folks to focus on listening. Please don't formulate what you're going to say next. Tune into who is speaking. Take care of yourself. Drink water, use the restroom. We have 2 hours slated for this till 8 p.m. And please take responsibility for yourself and your experience during the session as far as any needs that you may have. This is another important one. Stay with any discomfort. Stay curious about it. The topics we'll explore tonight will bring up discomfort and often can lead us to question our beliefs and experiences. Stay with that discomfort, get curious about it, examine it, and consider what it might be able to teach you. Courageous space or brave space or safer space, there's been a lot of talk about safe spaces, but we know too that being in different places in our learning, having different experiences, perspectives, and opinions means that we might step on a few toes and others may step on ours. Safe space doesn't mean that you won't be challenged, that you won't be uncomfortable. What we hope to create here is courageous space or brave spaces. Spaces where we can put ourselves out there, do our best, continue to learn, grow, make mistakes, and learn from them. Respect each other, respect yourself, and speak your truth with care. Let's really support each other through these sessions. Both and many of the choices and decisions that we'll be talking about tonight are not binary. 2 things can be true at the same time. And then many of the issues we will discuss tonight are institutional and systemic, and as such are not necessarily the fault of those in this virtual room. However, it is our collective responsibility to actively eradicate the problems within the systems that we will be discussing. Increasing awareness of oneself and who and where we fit into the system is a strategy for change. Relationships are the foundation for cultural competence. As I mentioned earlier, what my colleague said to me, they know what they know about people because they're willing to talk to them. So relationships that you form, and hopefully multicultural, diverse relationships, are really the foundation for being culturally competent. And lastly, there are no quick fixes. This will take time, dedication, and consistency. And with that, expect and accept a lack of closure. We will not figure out and solve all of the issues in one session or one evening. So with that, I believe those are the guidelines that I'd like to kind of put out there for us to subscribe to this evening and in remaining conversations. And I'd like to turn it over to the chief, who has an opening statement before we get into the actual question and answer period. And, you know, just a little bit more housekeeping. I think I have a series of topics with several questions underneath those. I realize that there are a lot of different representatives here this evening, and I will do my best to make sure that we get to touch on as many topics and the questions that are under those topic areas as we can. I can also send out this list of questions to those on the call tonight at the end if we feel like we're running late. And if anybody wants to submit a written, statement or written responses to the questions, you can do that, because I don't believe we're going to be able to get to all of them, but I do believe that the questions can provoke some thoughts and dialogue. So with that, I'm going to just mute myself for a second, grab a sip of water here, and turn it over to the chief for an opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And I would like to welcome all of our participants, our panelists here tonight for this conversation. I'd like to point out that there are two other groups present here. We have viewers, people at home that are viewing this, and we have policymakers and members of the steering committee, and hopefully the city council will join us, whose role primarily will be to listen. But the policymakers, members of the steering committee, and the city council, we are here as participants if asked. Our primary role is to listen and try to understand, but we will be here to answer questions if asked. So I wanted to point that out. I next wanted to issue a statement in order to get us started for tonight. I stated yesterday that the goal of these conversations is going to be an honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversation. I truly believe for us to move forward as a community, for the healing to occur where there is division, it has to start by this agency acknowledging its past harms. On behalf of the Schenectady Police Department and the fine men and women who work here and have worked here, I want to acknowledge the harm that has been inflicted upon our communities of color, and that I apologize for that harm. I'd like to apologize to the family of Andrew Kearse, his mother, his wife Angelique, and his children. I acknowledge that Andrew deserved better from us the day that he died. This happened on my watch, and I am sorry. There are past harms that were inflicted upon other members of our community that have not only affected them, but everybody in our community. I'd like to apologize for each and every one of them. I know that it's a long list. It's too long to read every one. But I specifically would like to acknowledge and apologize for the harm inflicted on David Sampson on July 28th of 1999. David Sampson was a person of color in our community that was taken into custody by the Schenectady Police Department and driven outside of the city limits to a rural part of Glenville. His shoes were removed and thrown into dense woods and left to walk home. The Schenectady Police Department failed Mr. Sampson that evening, and we failed our community that evening. This is a difficult job. Many times mistakes are made. These mistakes often have horrible consequences, and many times people lose their lives. Mistakes can lead to civilians losing their lives. They can also lead to police officers losing their lives. We train regularly to prevent both. But what happened to David Sampson and Andrew Kearse were not mistakes. They were failures of a system that did not prioritize life over mission. I'm here to tell you that that has changed. This community has my word on that. I'd also like to issue an apology to Michaela Foster. In yesterday's presentation, Michaela's image was used without consent, which caused harm, and it was wrong. And Michaela, I'm sorry for that. So I will now turn it over to Jason to begin our conversation.
Thanks again, Chief, and I appreciate that. Again, a bit of housekeeping. I myself would not be monitoring the chat room. We have somebody behind the scenes that will be looking at that. I'm going to really be focusing on engaging with the individuals that are speaking and making sure that I'm queuing up and looking at the next question, but please feel free to use the chat feature there. Although I think that once we get going, we have a set of questions that will really hopefully produce some great dialogue. So I would like to quickly go through the room and have people, if you can just listening. I think again, for the sake of time, we can't really allow for longer introductions than that. So with that, I'm going to use the agenda that was sent and call people's names. And if they're here, I'd ask you to please unmute yourself and quickly just introduce your name and the organization that you're representing this evening. So again, starting here at the top, we have Jack and John from Jack's Place. Are they on the call this evening?
Yes, I'm John. I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jack. I'm here. We represent the Jack Fowler III Foundation, the city of Schenectady, also known as Jack's Place.
Great. Thank you. I have next Victoria Cooper. Victoria on the line. Okay. Okay. Next on my list is Brian Ledbetter with My Brother's Keeper. Is Brian with us this evening? Okay. Mr. William Rivas, I think I saw your thumbnail there, sir. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, William Rivas, founder of Save Our Street, and the executive director of Purple Health.
Thank you. Deborah Rembert.
Yes, I'm here with you. I'm from the NAACP.
Thank you. And please, there's always that chance that I might, mispronounce a name. I'm not embarrassed to be corrected. So please, if I mispronounce your name, let me know that I made a mistake and we'll make sure we get it right. Portia Alston. Is Portia on the call? Okay. Williams.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carl Williams. I'm with the NAACP in addition with Ms. Rembert, and I'm looking forward to our conversation this evening.
Thank you. Maxine Brisport.
Hello, everyone. Again, Maxine Brisport. I'm here representing SCAP, Schenectady Community Action Program. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Miriam Cahoust. I know Miriam and I have met before, but may have mispronounced the last name. Miriam with SCAP, is she on the call?
Miriam was trying to get the link to get on.
Okay. Kirk Lewis. Okay. Chad Putman.
Good evening, Chad Plumman, co-chair of Schenectady Pride.
Good evening, Chad. Jamaica Miles.
Hi, this is Jamaica Miles, and appreciate that Schenectady Pride asked me to have their second seat. I do want to lift up that the name is Andrew Kearse. That's how you pronounce his name.
Thank you, Jamaica. Richard Hominick.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm representing the Schenectady Housing Authority as the executive director there.
Thank you. Kim Siciliano. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You did. Thank you, Jason. This is Kim Siciliano with YWCA Northeastern New York.
Thank you. Lauren Trunco.
Lauren and Wendy are not here.
Okay. Lauren and Wendy are not here, but I believe I saw in the chat box that somebody, oh, you are sitting.
I'm in as Wendy.
Okay.
I'm in as Wendy.
Okay, great.
Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you. Cynthia Farmer. Okay. Randy McGough.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Randy Magoo. I'm with the Schenectady Community Ministries. I'm on their steering committee, and also I'm a member of their social justice committee.
Thank you. Junior Hitlao.
Good evening, everyone. I'm representing the Guyanese community and also NAACP.
Thank you. Imzak Mohammed.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Imzak, and I'm with the Guyanese community.
Thank you. Avi Ishmael. Okay. And Jamel, is that Muhammad? Am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay. Well, thank you all for that, for your introductions, and just get right into it. What I'm going to try to do is call somebody's name, throw a question, and then we'll try to see if folks have something to add to that. But again, for the sake of trying to get to a number of questions, I'm not positive that we're going to be able to get everybody to respond to every single question. I want to be able to get through some more of these. So starting with Jack Falvo and John Roth, I'd like to ask the first question here, and it's, can you just start by talking a little bit about the community group you represent tonight? What preliminary info would you like to share today that you would like members of the task force to hear? And feel free to mention any important points your group would like to raise.
Okay, yes. John, if you don't mind, I'll start.
That's fine.
We're a nonprofit organization. We have a hospitality house that services Sunnyview Hospital and Ellis Medicine. Most of our guests are from out of town, typically 50 miles away or further, that respite with us when their loved ones, or a lot of times their children that are at one of the hospitals and are being treated. Typically, they're severe injuries, and takes quite a long time for them to heal and mend and to get them home. We like to say that our concerns in the community is safety for our guests and our staff, and there's some concerns with me particularly about their safety and well-being. Most of you know that I recently retired from the Schenectady Police Department after 40 years of service there. So the city is in my heart. And, you know, I was born and raised there and spent a good part of my life there. And I want to make sure it stays safe and that we can properly service our community. Obviously, we're strong advocates for the community, and I'll speak for John as well, that we definitely have an interest in the city and make sure that everything functions well, and so we can provide for our people.
Thank you. Okay, so coming down the line here, I believe Victoria and Brian weren't on the call, so William Rivas, did you want to also respond to that question? Start talking about the community group you represent and preliminary info you'd like to share, and feel free to mention any important topics or points that your group would like to raise.
Yes. So, you know, my primary focus is, of course, it's social justice. It's the safety of Black lives. It's the future of our youth. And being along, you know, and living in Schenectady my entire life and seeing the opportunity for change. My focus is always equitable change, the conversations, the work that we can do, respect for myself and for those around me, And again, I'm here for the work. I'm interested in the conversation, but I'm really interested in seeing what are the tangible efforts we pull out of this. I have a lot of respect for everybody on the call and all of the work that all of us do so much of the time. So, I'm really invested in what we can put together, what tangible efforts can come out of this, and that's going to be sustainable for our youth over time and for our community.
Thank you. Would a representative from the NAACP like to respond to the same question? A little bit about the group you represent and preliminary info you'd like the task force to hear and any important topics you'd like to raise.
Absolutely. So again, this is Carl Williams speaking. I'm a member of the Schenectady NAACP Chapter 2175 with Odo Butler as our president. Just going into a quick synopsis of what this organization has represented over the past 100 years. The NAACP was founded in 1909 in response to the ongoing violence against Black people around the country, and is the largest and most preeminent civil rights organization in the nation. As the chair of our Criminal Justice Committee, the NAACP advocates for smarter, results-based criminal justice policies to keep our communities safe, including treatment for addiction and mental health problems, judicial discretion in sentencing, and an end to racial disparities at all levels of the system. Now, specifically within the Criminal Justice Committee, we break down the task into three subcategories, which include prison reform, police and law enforcement, and community engagement. Now, the chapter within Schenectady was newly reenacted here. Conversation that we had within our community committee, criminal justice, chose to look at some of the components that we'll be addressing this evening surrounding use of force, de-escalation training and practices, procedural justice, and racial and systemic biases. Our only objectives with these conversations to include future conversations to have an effective dialogue that seeks to institute actual change. I think a lot of people on this call currently, not to want to take up too much more time, understand that these conversations have been acting or have been going throughout our communities for several years. And with these recent mandates from Governor Cuomo, we wish to seek effective change. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the NAACP have anything to add to that statement? Okay. Chad in Jamaica from Schenectady Pride. Same question. A little bit about the community you're representing, the group you're representing tonight, preliminary info you'd like the task force to hear, and any important points your group would like to raise.
Sure. Chad Plumman, co-chair of Schenectady Pride, was founded in 2012, and really the objective was to create space for the LGBTQ, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community in the city of Schenectady, and to also recognize the special contributions that the LGBTQ community has made to the city of Schenectady for generations, but also in the recent revitalization. Schenectady Pride has hosted an annual Pride event in June for the last 8 years. And this past year, we were grateful to be able to partner with we are grateful to be able to partner with all of us, and they hosted the first Black Lives Matter Pride. So I just want to hit my issue real quick, and then I'll turn the mic over to Jamaica to speak about that. The issue that I would like to bring to the table tonight is the importance of symbolism. One could look at the Rainbow Pride arches and the incorporation of Black Lives Matter that has occurred recently at the Gateway Plaza. And then as we think about and review and look at the Schenectady Police Department badge. Jamaica?
Thank you, Chad.
Thanks, Chad. And thank you again, Chad, for making sure that all of us is here at the table, even though we are coming through the lens of Schenectady Pride. And I sit here as a bisexual Black woman in a organization that is Black-led and that is strongly Black-led by LGBTQIA Black individuals who seek to unite people across intentional divisions, such as, but not limited to, race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, language, abilities, country of origin, geographic region, and economic status. We work to unite and create change for the benefit of the people based on the voices and experiences of those actual people, especially those most hurt by the current systems and structures of racism, sexism, exploitation, and oppression. All of us works in partnership and coalition with other community groups and organizations, sharing and uniting our networks and resources, because we know now more people are united than ever before. Communities have actually been calling for an end to systemic racism, exploitation, and oppression, an end to state-sanctioned violence, which has taken the lives of Native, Indigenous, Black, Brown, and Latinx people, that kills trans people, and that denies far too many justice and freedom. In this moment, and especially on this call and the conversations yet to come, all of us continues to support lifting up the voices of the individuals and communities directly impacted by police violence and violence enacted against Black, Indigenous, people of color, and other poor and marginalized people across the justice system. That includes not just policing, but also prosecution and incarceration, surveillance of our communities, especially when those individuals return home, if we're so lucky for people to return home from incarceration. Our fight for Black lives is about the long history of injustice against our people and other marginalized groups, because it's not just the last couple of years, it's not less the last decade, we're talking of hundreds of years that we're up against. We're committed to a constant presence and pressure until there is systemic and structural and institutional change here in the city of Schenectady. And we're committed to turning this moment of heightened awareness, where people are coming out and saying, hey, I want change, to actual systemic change that is a sustained movement for change. Because unfortunately, there have always been policies, laws, and practices and institutions, such as policing, that disproportionately impact Black, Indigenous people of color. There have also always been voices calling for justice. This isn't new, but here we are. And in this time, we are dedicated again to lifting up those voices and make sure that this is something led by community voices, which hasn't happened so far. This has been led by the mayor and the chief of police, and not the community most impacted. And so all of us is committed to continuing to create space for conversations, as we always have, and working across differences, as well as investing in our local communities. So hopefully tonight, we'll finally actually see some change, because June 11th, we said we had demands for systemic and structural change. It wasn't until June 12th that there was an executive order. And again, long before that, there was a call for change that we've never seen from the mayor or the police chief at the levels that we are currently asking for. So maybe we can finally get to some of those.
Thank you, Chad and Jamaica. Your voices and perspectives are sorely needed in this process. Thank you. Richard Hominick with SMHA. I can't recall if he was on the call.
Yes, I am on the call.
Yes.
Thank you. Just responding to that same initial question. I'd like to bring a couple things forward that is kind of a common theme with the hearing from the Housing Authority and the clients that we serve, which is approximately 500 families in the city through 8 different affordable housing programs spread out around the city. The first thing I think is important is it's kind of a basic comment on breaking the stigma that goes with affordable housing and people that need affordable housing. It's something that, sometimes, I tell people what I do and they give me this, geez, I'm sorry, that must be such a terrible job, must be so hard. And I hear that, and I really right away understand people don't realize that the families we serve are just families like anybody else. They just have a need for some financial support. And I think this this pandemic really does prove how everybody is one step away from poverty. It may be something that creeps up on you like the pandemic, that you might have had a job today and looking forward to that permanency, and the next day you're without a job and just can't afford to pay your bills. So I like to remind people that affordable housing is something that serves an array of families, and that when I hear comments from people in the community, and this goes from everywhere from the police department to just the general public, having a general feeling that oh geez, I got to go to Yates Village, or I have to go to Steinmetz Homes, or when in reality they're just communities source to provide the housing to people. It's really no different than any other part of the city. So I just want to make the point that we talk about a lot here is stop referring to certain neighborhoods in the city in a negative term just because they may be having a little more criminal activity or something else. I mean, the bottom line is the families are good families. There's always, there's bad on my street and there's bad on every street. So I just want to say that seems very basic and simple, but I think when you live every day and feel that, it makes a big impact on you as a person and what may inspire you to move on. The second thing I want to add is, and I know this is talked about a lot, and I know there's shortages in the police department, and I do want to say that the police department's been a great partner with us, and I respect all of them for the job that they do. But community policing, when we had it, I've been with the Housing Authority since 1993, and when we had community policing in the 90s, it was a big, I even remember the officer's name. I mean, Johnny DiGesualdo, he was the officer assigned to public housing. And the beautiful thing about that was the interaction with the residents was long lasting. And it was really figuring out the neighborhood, figuring out who should be there, and just kind of building that trust. I mean, things we've all heard about community policing, but I think it keeps coming around because it's so true and it works and it's genuine. And if there's anything we could do to rebuild that, and I'd like to hear if other people believe that's still a good source, of building the community around the police department, I'd be interested in hearing more on that. So those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. I forgot to mention that the Finn Institute and others are on the call, and they're in the background taking notes and taking that will be integral to the report that's going to be produced out of this process. So please know that if you might not see me writing anything down, that someone is behind the scenes certainly jotting down all the ideas and things discussed today. So I know we have Kim from the YWCA on the call. Kim, would you like to respond to that question as well? A little bit about your org and any important points you would like to raise this evening that you'd like the task force to hear. I believe she's logged in under Wendy, but.
Yeah, I am. Am I okay? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. I'm Kim Siciliano. I'm with YWCA Northeastern New York. Our mission is to eliminate racism and empower women. So I think it's integral for us to be on this call, and we provide services to anyone in Schenectady and as well as many other counties in housing, domestic, and early learning. So I think we must stay mission focused. We must be action oriented. Somebody spoke about, we want to see tangible movement out of, and we have to elevate our ability to be allies in the community. And it's essential work. We can't allow work not to be done because we need a just and equitable society. And the intersectionality of all of the isms that take place on any given day in our community needs to be dissected and worked on, and we need to do it together. We have a good relationship with the Schenectady Police Department. We constantly work together with our domestic violence cases and with our housing cases, and we want to make sure that that partnership stays strong and solid and that we all work together with the rest of the community and the communities of color so that we continue to move forward. That we can't be stagnant, we can't go backwards, and this is 400 years of discrimination, of racism, of all of the isms going on, and we need to change that. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. McCoo, I know you're on the call. Would you like to respond? to that.
Yes, I'm representing, as you know, the Schenectady Community Ministries, which a lot of people used to know us as Schenectady Inner City Ministries, but we're now moving into becoming we're moved into becoming an interfaith organization. So we not only represent the Christian community, but other faith communities such as the Jewish community, the Sikh community, and we're hoping to bring in the Islamic community. Our central focus is to bring the resources of our various member groups to help out the needs of the greater community. A lot of folks identify us as just running our pantry, which is our largest operation, and also the summer meals program, which is our second largest operation. But we also, in addition to providing for folks through their pantry and through the summer meals program, we also have a social justice focus. And Sikkim has long had a long-standing history in that regard. I mean, Sikkim has been around for over 50 plus years, and we've been involved in the creation of a number of different organizations within the city of Schenectady, from Save House to Bethesda House, to mention a couple of them. But we're really focused. I mean, right now we're really trying to focus our attention on advocacy and social justice. We have a social justice committee that is engaged in looking at the issues surrounding institutional racism and systemic racism, and we're hoping, and we really, in fact, if you go by our site on Albany Street, you'll see a big banner that we just put up for Black Lives Matter. So we're really focusing on that. But our purpose is, and I really don't want to speak on behalf of all of the many folks that we represent and many folks who work in our agency on a day-to-day basis, but our focus is to try to, again, bring the resources of the community, of our faith communities, to meet the needs of everyone in the community, regardless of their race, creed, religion, sexual orientation, prisoner status, immigration status, whatever. So that's our focus, and that's why we're here.
Thank you. Would Imzak or another member of the Guyanese community like to respond to that question as well? Opening statement about your community and any issues that you'd like to put on the table tonight.
Yeah, Zach. I'll chime in with a little bit. Guyanese community is just looking to see just things like more community engagement and ways to have the community come together as a whole, like all the communities, and then like education and like education of culture and customs and proper history made available in terms of information and ways that we can kind of share with each other, and there's more transparency. And I'm pretty much resonating with what a lot of other people are looking for and saying, and I think that's where we're at right now. There are other things that Junior, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? I don't know if he's still there.
No, I got a note from Junior in the chat box that he felt like a lot of the initial concerns were articulated by other groups. So.
Yeah, that's what I was feeling too. That's pretty much just ways for us to come together as a whole and to see the systemic change happen.
Great, thank you. Looking at the chat box here, and I see that all of us, Michaela from All of Us is on the call. I don't see them on a thumbnail. I don't know if they need to be elevated. I think I see Jamaica logged in under their login, but I'm getting a note that Michaela would like to say a word of introduction.
Yeah, we don't know what happened because I logged in with my email, but somehow it says I'm Michaela. So yeah, if Michaela could speak.
Okay.
Jason, we're gonna give her the privilege.
Okay, Michaela, I believe, yes, has to be, great. Brought into the room as a panelist. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Michaela Foster, they, them pronouns. I work with All of Us Community Action, and I'm on the same page as with everything that Jamaica said and stated. And our focus is specifically to maintain the push forward towards not just reform, but abolition of the structures in place that create harm to marginalized people and taking lead from those most marginalized. So that means showing up as and showing up for Black, Indigenous, Brown, Latinx, and queer people across the spectrum of gender. Continuing to show up and do that work, continuing to show up for our community by taking lead from our community and those people most afflicted by the harm, institutions, and structures in place that marginalize people every day. Thank you for unmuting me. And again, they, them pronouns only. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Okay, I'm going to change my script a little bit. I'm noticing that I think, it seems like the group is really interested in having a productive, constructive conversation. So rather than go down the line, what I'm going to do is just read the next question, and then I'll ask anyone to kind of maybe raise a hand or signal that they'd like to respond, and then we'll kind of just allow it to flow from there. If other folks want to respond to the same question, they can. If I get the sense that that question seems like it was answered and nobody else has really much to add, then I can move on to the next. Does that sound, does anybody have any objections to that quick kind of curveball change? Yes.
Jason, this is Kirk Lewis. I was having technical problems, but I got unmuted, and I just wanted to, can I give a brief introduction
Yes,
for
please.
myself?
Thank you. I'm sorry, Kirk. Yes, go ahead. Kirk Lewis from the Schenectady ARC. Just talk a little bit about your organization and any important points you'd like to raise this evening.
So Schenectady ARC is an organization, we're a private, not-for-profit organization. We support people with developmental disabilities. We've been in Schenectady for almost 70 years now. We have our main office building is downtown. We have 5 houses in the city. We have sites throughout the county. And we serve about 1,000, mostly adults with developmental disabilities, people who need different kinds of supports in their daily lives. We have a workforce of over 500 individuals. We have a very diverse workforce. Many of our employees live in Schenectady. Many of the people we support work and live in Schenectady, either in apartments or in the programs that we run or the houses that we sponsor. So our focus is on the community. When Schenectady is healthy and it's thriving, it's going to help us and the people we support be healthy and thrive and achieve their life goals. So we come at this from the perspective of the people we support. We come at it as people who live in, I've grew up in Schenectady, went to Schenectady schools, and have lived there most of my life. And we come at it as, a place where a lot of our workers live and need to feel safe and need to feel that, and again, we have a very diverse workforce, that they're not disadvantaged or targeted or, subject to unfair practices. So, I'm looking forward to the dialogue here and to developing discussions and procedures and practices going forward that will lead that to people feeling safe and to feeling that they have a police force that they can work with and they can trust.
Thank you, Kirk. Okay, so again, I'm just going to change it up a little bit. I think what I'm going to do is just read a question. If somebody would like to respond, raise your hand. I'll call on you. Please then respond. And then I would ask that, we'll kind of let that question linger out there if other people want to chime in. And when we feel like we've kind of gotten some good responses to the question, I'll try to move on to the next. So for anyone that would like to respond, and again, with the kind of idea that if we're not hearing from a certain group or we're hearing too much from one, I will try to do my best to try to elicit broad conversation here. But from your perspective, everyone on the call, how would you describe the current status of the relationship between Schenectady Police and our wider community? And this is to the issue of trust. How would you describe the current status of the relationship with the Schenectady Police Force and the wider community?
Well, this is Ms. Rumbert. I don't think that the communications and the understanding of the police department is as it should be. I do believe that there needs to be a better understanding from the police department concerning the people that they have to serve. I think they should be more uh, for a better word, that they should be, better equipped to deal with the public than what they seem to be. To some extent, they do pretty decent, but you know, there's an incident that I'm thinking about where the police actually broke into a person's home and at very early in the morning, and to apprehend a person that had not did their community service or didn't talk to their parole officer when they should have. And I think the police should have dealt with that person differently. I think that they should be more, they say that they care about what happens to the public. They care about how they're dealing with the public, but they're not exactly acting like they do. When you break into people's houses and you don't give them any kind of response like, I'm coming in, or can I call you and let you know that this person is not doing what they're supposed to do? I think that sometimes that they go above and beyond their call of duty when it comes down to dealing with the public.
Thank you, Deborah. I see William's hand. Yes, William.
Quite frankly, I mean, the communication, the trust between the city and the police department is broken, and it has been broken for a very long time. I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice to not have an honest conversation and talk about the fact that that is a lot of the work that's been happening, is trying to not restore something like that, but it's to rebuild it on something new. That's why I respect the work of individuals like Jamaica and Chad so much, because we're living at a time right now where so much of what's wrong with policing in our community and the way and social injustice is, it's exposed. You see so much of it all the time. So, we're really in a place where we're looking for accountability. We're not looking for restoration of a broken system. We're looking for change. We're looking for community voices at the table. We're looking for institutional change. Which is why people are requesting to look at, for a person like myself, I want to understand the policies, the procedures. I want to understand the training. I want to know what you know. That way, when we sit down and we start to have these conversations, there's institutional change, tangible evidence of this is what it looks like and this is where we are. To be honest, as an individual living in the city of Schenectady my entire life, there are a number of instances we can go through where we can talk about, we wish the police would have treated things and treated people differently. But for me, it's about, like, right now, when we have the essence of so much impact, so many people, so many ideas, and so many voices, I'm excited to be able to capture that, to start really the work, because as a kid growing up in Schenectady, we didn't trust the police. My mother was a Schenectady County sheriff, and she worked with the police, and because of some of her experiences, she didn't trust them. And to see how some things later played out in her professionalism because of that. So, my hope is that we can build on something, create something new. But as of right now, I think that's why we're here having these conversations. That's why we're in the community. That's why people are doing the work, because people of color, we're not happy with what's been happening, and we want change, and we're here to put the work forward to get it done.
Thank you, William. I realize that I said raise your hand, and I realize that some of you are not on video. So if there's anyone who's only on audio that would like to jump in on that question, just unmute yourselves and try to get in. And if I see that two people are trying to get in at the same time, then I'll call a name. But the question right now is, how would you describe the current status of the relationship with the Schenectady Police and the wider community?
Yeah, so I did raise my hand, but I'm also going to jump in.
Go ahead.
The relationship between the police and the wider community is one of abuser and abusee. We currently, no, there's not trust. As Will had talked about, I also, we both grew up in Schenectady. My first interaction with a police officer, I was 13, 14 years old. And he had said to me, what did you say? Because I was having a conversation with my mom about something. Um, and while that may seem like a long time ago, 30 plus years ago, there are still stories today of people and their interactions with police officers and the harm that they've caused. The time that we have spent over the last 5 months talking to community members and community members sharing their personal interactions with police. There have been mothers talking about their sons and being beaten and abused. I appreciate that the police chief mentioned a couple specific names, but we don't know how many other names there actually are of individuals that have had these horrible interactions with police. And yet then we say, oh, well, the police need to have a better relationship with community members. And so we're going to play basketball or we're going to send them into our schools. What you're doing is you are sending abusers into situations where the people that they've harmed are now faced with them again. You are causing trauma and triggering. There are high school students who have spoken out about this and said, we don't want cops in our high school. We don't want you coming in and telling us about the jobs that you could give us, as if we want the person that came in and hurt our mothers, our fathers, our sisters, our brothers. That's not who we look up to. So to have trust would mean that your role in the community starts from a place of keeping people safe and not causing harm, but police come in with guns, tasers, pepper spray. That's what they show up with. They show up with violence, but you're asking us to trust those that caused harm. And again, Yogeshwar had a knee on his neck just a couple months ago, and we still don't even have the report back from that. So how can we have trust? There's no transparency. The repeal of 50A happened, and we still don't even have the report of something that happened a couple months ago to a member of the Guyanese community. So there's so many different examples. It's beyond comprehension at this point to figure out why that's even a question, because for some of us, it's obvious.
Thank you, Jamaica. Anybody else like to respond to that question on the topic of community involvement and building trust?
Yeah, I'd like to. Imzak here.
Yes, please.
Just to keep it short, I do agree with Jamaica on terms of how people feel when they see police officers come into certain things like the schools and whatever, and that's agreeable. People do get triggered; they feel invaded in a sense at times. However, while that is still said, I'd still like to see ways that the police, the communities can come together and on a slightly more personal level interact and try to learn from each other, because I do still feel like that's a great way to kind of elaborate on the roles of who we are as people. And if we can find a way to come at each other at a more human element, then I feel like we could lessen the burden of what people feel and educate. I know that's a tall order. There's a lot there to unpack in terms of how we get there, but I feel like that's a big thing. Like having police just show up and guard things versus having police and actually interacting with people. You know, that kind of idea. Um, if you're having a giant event at the park and there's just police around surveilling, people are not willing to go up to the police car and talk to them because partly they might think that, oh, we might be distracting them from their work, partly because they think that, oh, they might be looking at us trying to see if we're going to commit something. So there's that discrepancy there. I feel like if the people in the police off duty maybe can interact with the community more, talk to people more, educate more, and then people from the communities educate the police more of what they represent, and we have this exchange of ideas on a more personal note at these types of events, at these types of meetings. We can all learn from each other and we can all grow together as a community. But when we have the separation of the police and the community is the community, that's where we have this distrust. That's where people can take advantage of the distrust and start spreading falsehoods on both sides of the issue. But at the same time, I do want to reiterate how I do agree with what Jamaica was saying, specifically about people feeling triggered, people feeling disheartened that they can't trust anyone of law enforcement officials, things like that. It's disheartening. So I personally see it as a work in progress, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order for the police to regain some type of trust with the community, I feel.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I see a note here that Michaela would like to comment. Please, Michaela, you have the floor.
Just to further along one specific point about the absence of trust between community and the force of policing. We are in a huge moment right now, specifically centric to Schenectady, where transparency has come into question many times, specifically the case involving the repeal of 50A and it being brought to court in regards to redacting information from officers' files. This is happening not only in Schenectady, but in Buffalo and in New York City as a pushback against the repeal of 50A and thus a pushback against transparency in policing. Public records are public for a reason, and this was a statewide order through the governor to create transparency. And I have not seen anybody in the Schenectady Police Department say anything in regards to the fact that if you want to build trust, you need to at least do the bare minimum of granting us transparency. There's been no pushback against going against the repeal of 50A and the instance with Officer Palmer putting a knee on someone's neck. And now people, specifically the PBA, trying to maintain his files and keep them private. There shouldn't be anything private about policing because you are policing a community that oftentimes you're not even a part of. I think that it gets so convoluted when we discuss trust, the trust that does not exist. So it shouldn't be a question of what does that trust look like when for a great majority of us, that trust doesn't exist. There is no presence of trust in this community. And it's inflicted over and over again and reiterated that there's no trust because when things like this are brought up and the community says, we show up and say, hey, not only should you not be allowed to do this, and here's why, but you should be pushed to transparency. And many times, specifically this time, we have not seen the Schenectady Police Department say anything in regards to or anything along the lines of, no, we support transparency. If we're going to keep saying that we want to build trust, here is us building trust. Here is us saying that Palmer files should be made public with no redactions and nothing like that. And also to the point that like police being in our communities, them being our friends doesn't necessarily change the institutional structure of what policing is. Policing is here to maintain an idea of law and order, and has not really ever really ever been about maintaining safety and well-being of everyone. And that's not to go against what has been said about policing, but that is what the data has collected. Incarceration and policing has never proven to actually reduce crime. And that's the data. So if we're going to start from a place, let's start where the authenticity lies, where the transparency is. Let's talk about what has happened, because we can't just build from where we are. We have to get down to where we came from, what the foundation of policing is, and work to not only reallocate resources, but actually have transparency and accountability within these police forces. Otherwise, the conversation about trust is completely jaded. And that's my experience. That's the experience I've been told by others in my community when I reach out. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Michaela, for bringing up the topic of trust, and Imzak also for alluding to some potential things that could make this better. And in an effort to make these sessions not purely about identifying the issues, but also possible solutions, I'd like to throw out a accompanying question. In your opinion, what can be done to strengthen the trust between the police and the wider community, particularly through the lens of the group you're representing? And we already had, Michaela talk on transparency, and Imzak mentioned, the need for more personal connection or opportunity. So from your perspective, what can be done to strengthen the trust between the police and the wider community?
The only thing I can think of, this is Ms. Rumbert, the only thing I can think of that will strengthen the ability to have more trust with the police is there needs to be a more of a diverse department. If you have only one nationality of groups of people that are governing all nationalities, it makes it unequal. We need to have a diverse group of people in all of our law enforcement community and make it so that they can all come to the table and talk to each other and try to resolve a lot of the issues that we're facing, because just having one group of people there, their views and what they believe is the topical conversation of everything. They're making all the laws. They're making all of the decisions for all of us. That is something that is harming our community, our America completely. That is very harmful to have only one group speaking for all groups. We need everybody at the table. We need Black people at the table. We need Hispanics at the table. We need all the groups to come to the table to try to be able to resolve the problems with the police. We don't need the police to be an all-white group. And that's not being racist. That's just telling the truth, that we need to have a more diverse police department that can govern our cities and make things more fairer for everybody. And that's in the politics, that's in everything, every facet of our lives in America. We need to change the dynamics of what's happening here in our culture.
Thank you, Deborah. I'd like to encourage people who haven't maybe spoken up, if you'd like to chime in. What can be done from your perspective to strengthen the trust?
Hi, I would like to. I didn't introduce myself earlier because I wasn't added. I'm Rachel Curtis, and I'm also representing Schenectady Community Ministries with Randy Magoo. And I do believe that we need some anti-racist education for the police department, because there are a lot of white men and women in the police department. And I do see a willingness on behalf of the administration of the police department to make change. However, there are a lot of cops on the ground who have had little to no experience with people of color. And I know this because I went to high school with a lot of them. And I'm not saying that that the programming in place is ineffective, but I do think it needs to be strengthened, and anti-racist education needs to be a part of everyday life in the police department.
Thank you, Rachel. And I see Mr. Magoo's hand. Yes, sir.
What I was going to say is, a lot of what has been said, I'll sort of make the analogy to education, because when you look at education, you have the issue of teachers not being of the same backgrounds of the people that they're teaching. Yes, you can do training of individuals to make them more supportive and understanding of the people that they're working with. But the other issue is like in education, changing the curriculum, like the 1609 project and things like that, because a lot of the issues that we're talking about are systemic issues that have been part of policing since policing began. Going back even to, like, if you look at the 13th Amendment and how it freed slaves, but it said if you committed a crime, you could still be put on a work crew without even being tried. So this goes way back in history, and it's continued to the present. And what we see right now in terms of some of the outcomes in terms of the abuse and other things is related to that. So even if you bring people into the mix, if you still have a systemic issue in play, they're still going to be, impacted by those systemic issues in terms of how they react and handle their duties. So that, and at a local level, we can do the best we can in terms of changing our local policies and procedures, but it has to go above the local level. It has to go to the state level and the federal level. Because right now, I mean, one of the big questions I have in terms of policing in general is we have a federal government that's saying law, preaching law and order, and we have a governor saying that we need to do more of us, compassionate and caring policing. So, even there's a conflict. There's a contradiction, a conflict, or whatever. So, I mean, we still the biggest issue is dealing with the system itself and how we can change the system to make it more adaptable and more supportive of the people that it serves.
Maxine, is your hand up?
Yes, it is. So,
Yes.
yes,
Please.
thank you for-
In your opinion, what would you offer to strengthen the trust?
So the conversation shifted a little to education, and without respect, we won't have trust. Respect comes from understanding, in my opinion. And I just want to go back to the past two speakers mentioned something about education and anti-racism. I think one of the biggest issue we have across, not just in Schenectady, but across the country, is that we have students from all races, just students across the entire nation, going from pre-K to the 12th grade, even through college, without ever having a conversation or a class or nothing in the curriculum that provides them the opportunity to talk about race, racism, bias, privilege, and all those things. No one, without those beyond, we end up with people coming out of our school system, be it high school or college, knowing who is valued in society and who is not valued. And we all have to admit and understand and just be truthful and honest that we have an education system that still graduate people who are coming out with a white supremacist mentality. And I don't mean that in a horrible way. It's just the fact. We have people who are coming out because of the way the curriculum is set up, that white males are the most valued and so on and so forth. And that is a problem we have. If you're someone going out and you're thinking there's a part of the population or certain people in society, and let's just use black males, are not valued, they won't be treated with any respect. And that is where the lack of trust is coming in, because you don't get any respect, so you can't trust the people. Goes back to the fact that we don't teach we don't have conversations about race and about bias and about privilege and all those necessary conversation that needs to go on from the minute we are in, even before pre-K. And so just one last thing. So across this nation, in many households, mostly in households that people are Hispanic or Black and other races, it's a necessity to have these conversations. But I know in many white households, those conversations are not going on. Someone mentioned that the police department is mostly white males. And so if they've never had an opportunity to have those conversations, it's very difficult when they join the force to have that understanding of how to treat others with respect. Because again, I stand by my words. We have an education system that is teaching us that some of us are more valued than others, just by the way the curriculum is, by the people we see as leaders when in the books we are reading. We have many students who will go through school and I've never read any books that are. It's not just a public school system, and I don't want to call out any private school in the area, but I know as a fact, there are no books in a specific private school, which is all male, so they're coming out in leadership positions, that there are no books that has anyone who is Black, Hispanic in the leader as the main character in those books. And if there are characters in the books, it's usually presented sometime in a negative way. So. Thanks for listening. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, Maxine. Your voice was
plus one to everything you said, Maxine. Plus one.
Okay.
Also, the CPRB hasn't been mentioned yet, and that's an actual process that currently exists that doesn't have trust within it. So the CPRB is the process by which individuals, if they have a complaint about the police force, there's a form for them to fill out. and then to say that some wrong has been done to them by a police officer in the way that they were engaged. But that process means that currently someone fills out a complaint, it goes to the police. It doesn't go directly to the Civilian Police Review Board. Who has trust in saying to the cops that I got a complaint about the cops? How are you supposed to trust that? If you're complaining about someone, you should go directly to the person that reviews that. It should go directly to the Civilian Police Review Board. It should not go through a process that goes through, what is it, OPS or whatever that is, and then it goes to the chief before it goes to the Civilian Police Review Board. It should be that if there is a complaint about an officer, it goes directly to the Civilian Police Review Board. And the Civilian Police Review Board is then given the file of that officer for full review without redaction to know if there have been other allegations, other complaints, other disciplinary actions that have happened against them, whether founded or unfounded, and that they have the ability to then request other information and material from the chief of police as they see fit. That is a process that breeds trust, because you know that you are going to someone outside of the police force. In theory, the Civilian Police Review Board is individuals from the community, and not going to cops to ask cops if cops did a bad thing. It shouldn't start with the police. If you're complaining about the police, let's make sure that we are going to the individuals in our communities, and let's make sure that on the Civilian Police Review Board, there are impacted people who are either formerly incarcerated or family members of formerly incarcerated people, to be able to bring that perspective.
Thank you, Jamaica, and thank you for kind of narrowing down some more tangible, actual changes. I want to remind folks that these sessions are brief, so for the more we can kind of really narrow this down to actionable, tangible things that the policymakers can actually craft into changing policy, the better. Yes, other entities like education and other are going to come into play, and poverty and other issues. But for the scope of this conversation, especially with limited time, I want to make sure that we're actually offering up things that can contribute to the report and contribute to actually moving policy. So, yes, Richard.
Okay, sorry, didn't unmute. Just to follow up on Jamaica's comments, having served on the Police Review Board, I will say that, unknown prior to getting on, but, kind of surprised when we started working on some of the first cases that everything before the review board was presented anonymously. We couldn't see video, we couldn't hear audio, we couldn't know who an officer was. We were just relying on internal affairs investigation, putting that in front of the committee. I mean, my recommendation, if you want to talk about specifics, and I know Randy served on that board with me too, is to have a police review board who has to go as far as taking an oath of confidentiality, whatever it might take to make sure that the board itself is trusted to keep confidence in what is being presented, to have the real tangible evidence in front of them, to be able to witness what was occurring, because so many times there was, a 180-degree opposite statement from an officer that there was from somebody making a complaint. And we'd scratch our heads and say, well, if that's the case, then there's no case. So, I mean, I know there's videos everywhere. I know that that's a sensitive issue. But if we have a board that, again, is restricted to confidence and really is there for the good of the community and really gets to know the officers, not just from the perspective of what they're maybe doing wrong through a complaint, but just really meeting with the officers, getting to know them. I found the training that I went through to be extremely valuable. And I've mentioned in past conversations, it should be offered to the entire citizenship of the city. The use of force training opened my eyes on why a police officer might be administering a certain blow, not to harm a person, but to protect other people around them. If this person has a weapon beneath them, that someone can't see. There were just things that opened my eyes. But I do come back to Jamaica's comment, to build a police review board that's going to have some value, and or it's probably not even worth having if you can't really outfit it with the tools it needs to have to really do what it's there to do.
Thank you. Thank you for offering some tangible. So certainly, complaint, officer complaint, and the police review is certainly sounds like a tangible area where some changes can be made. We're coming up on 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes. And Chad, did I see your hand there?
Yeah, thank you. Chad Putman again with Schenectady Pride. I just want to say that back in 2016, following the Orlando nightclub shooting, having the Schenectady PD present for the Schenectady Pride Festival that happened in front of City Hall that year, their presence was appreciated, and I was grateful for that. And for several years that followed, being a group that has been targeted by hate groups and individuals and murdered in the street because of our sexual orientation or gender identity, having a police presence at the event has comforted me, and I believe others in the past. And I felt that that's true up until this past year. And I think following the murder of George Floyd, the initial response by the Schenectady Police Department seemed to be positive, but then it seemed to really go downhill afterwards. And I think for me, what really soured my belief of where the trust is today is when all of us hosted the takeover of the city hall, and the police presence that I was able to identify at that event was a drone in the sky. And when I think about community policing, I felt that that was extremely insulting. I'd also like to call in the mayor and the folks at City Hall, and I realized that we're in the midst of COVID, but for an entire community coming together to speak about the importance of Black Lives Matter and to have a City Hall that's locked to them, nobody answering the doors, and I believe police present on the inside, quote unquote, protecting the building, it just created this negative space. And I think it was a huge miss and a big error. I also think it's important that when you think about the 2020 budget, money speaks to values and priorities. And when you have a police department where you have chiefs who are receiving raises, and you have nearly $1 million being spent on police cars and thousands of dollars being spent on tasers, that doesn't necessarily improve trust. It speaks to where the value is, and I understand that they want to retain their equipment and keep it up to par, but I think that says a lot, and it does a lot to sour relationships, unfortunately.
Thank you, Chad.
Can I jump in?
Yes, please. Who? I'm not sure.
I'm having a latency
Jack,
problem.
please.
I'm having a little latency got with my computer. I don't know if everybody else
Yeah,
is.
and just a reminder for those who are not speaking to please put yourselves on mute. We're getting a little bit of background feedback, but Mr. Falvo, please.
Okay. You all know I recently retired, and I can tell you that there is so much good going on with the Schenectady Police Department in the community. Nothing happens overnight. Things take time. There's no doubt there's change that needs to be done. And I believe that the Schenectady Police Department is well on their way of uniting the community with the police. Now, you talked about accountability. You all want the police to be accountable. Well, it goes two ways. It goes both ways. Everybody's got to be accountable to each other. I've personally seen where I was in the schools reading to kids over the years, and then trying to sow relationships with students, only to have family members try to tear that down. For example, stating that Why are you talking to the police? You know, you want to build trust. It has to go both ways. And I believe that this transparency, again, they're doing a great job just by posting all the policies and procedures. So you know how police operate and function. And I think that's a key right there. So if you educate yourselves on the policies and procedures of the police department, you'll understand why we do what we do. There was talk about police breaking into people's homes. Well, that's all part of being accountable. The police know right and wrong. So their job is to wrong's right. And they have policies and procedures that they abide by. They go by due process. Now, everybody's entitled to due process. You know, be it police, be it the public. Changes, some of these changes are legal changes. It's going to take time. They have to go through the court system a lot of times. There's appeals processes. So again, things take time. That's why things don't materialize immediately. They take time.
Hi, my name's Carl Williams. I'd really like to. Oh, you're not done. Sorry.
I just want to. I'll end quickly here, but I think some of the problem is with recruiting. There's the officers. They go into the communities every time the civil service exam is scheduled. Try to recruit minorities, and yes, we do get minorities to take these tests. But I think sometimes the obstacle is the civil service laws, the rule 1 and 3 you have to pick. I think if the state changes that and spreads it out, maybe gives the police department or the municipalities an opportunity to pick maybe 1 and 5, maybe we could get more minorities on the job, on the police department. Training. I teach ethics down at the police academy. Unfortunately, that's about the only time they'll get any training on ethics. I think that needs to be expanded throughout law enforcement careers. Extending probation. They have to extend the probation period. Probation period for new police officers is 1 year. 6 months, they're in the academy. 3 more months, they're in field training. That's 9 months. You have 3 more months to evaluate an officer while they're on probation. That needs to be extended to probably 2 years to give the agencies an opportunity to assess and evaluate their candidates. So with that, I don't want to take too much time, but again, we're all accountable. We have to be accountable, both the public and law enforcement.
Thank you for those
There's a
perspectives,
oops
Mr.
here.
Falvo.
There's a ouch
okay.
and a oops
There's an
that needs
ouch.
to be lifted up.
Go ahead,
And
Jamaica.
I don't even want to say ouch because we're not minorities. We are the global majority. We are minoritized in communities and jobs and positions. We are marginalized. And by calling us a minority, it's actually harmful. If you don't know the race of an individual, if you don't know if they're Black or Latinx or Guyanese or what their ethnicity is, to say people of color or marginalized people or minoritized people, because we're not the minority. We're the global majority, and we live in a global economic system.
Thank you. I know we're running short on time. Thank you.
I'd like to say one thing because he made reference to 2 things that I had to say. The thing about it is, if you're going to be reading to children, playing basketball with children, and then the next day you go to their house and break into their house and to apprehend someone or to think that you're apprehending someone, how do you think that child feels? I don't think that the police, if you're trying to establish a relationship with the public, then you need to establish a relationship with the public. Like this incident that I'm talking about, the police went to these people's house, broke in their back door to apprehend this person that has mental disabilities. I don't think that was the right way to handle that. Why couldn't they have called that person's family member? They know who they are, and say, listen, we're here to pick up your son or daughter or whatever, and we want to see if we can do it in a civilized and a good way, so that we can have your respect as a community person. That would have been better. They had about 75 police officers out there for this one person. I don't think that that's a fair thing to do to a family, because the person is afraid and the person has mental disabilities, and it's not like you don't know this person. This person is in the system, and you know that this person has mental disabilities, but yet you traumatize the whole family by going in there, breaking into their home in the wee hours of the morning to apprehend this person, when all you had to do was call up their parole officer and say, look, call this person up, tell this person that they need to get back to the meeting with the parole officer, and give them a certain time to get there, and do it that way. Unless the person has committed a horrible crime like raping a person or killing somebody, I don't think that kind of tactic is needed to try to apprehend someone and tell them that they got to come back down to the police department. And this person was afraid and said, well, I don't want to go to jail anymore. You know this person is off their medication. So why didn't you just put them into the facility that they need to be put into, to try to help them to get back on their medication? These are the kinds of things that the police are doing, and they're sort of putting their foot in their. One minute they're saying we're trying to be your friend, and the next minute you're over here breaking in people's houses and tearing them up and scaring the whole house. That's ridiculous. Just like I said before, we need to have more diversity. That's another issue that he spoke about. We need to have more diversity to happen in the police department. We need more, we have a diverse community, a diverse world. We don't need to have one group that governs all the groups in our country. That is unfair, and a lot of times we have police officers with nepotism. They have their uncle, their father, their brother, their sister. Who's going to go against these people if these people make a bad decision on the police force? Nobody's going to go against them. They're going to say, listen, I'm not going against my cousin. I'm not going to go against my brother, even though I know he's wrong. I'm not going against him. So we need to break up this nepotism that is in the police department. We need to break up and have a more diverse police department, so that we can have more people at the table talking and saying, listen, I'm Guyanese. This is how to work with my type people. Okay, I'm African American, which you well know, because we've been working together for many centuries. This is how you should work with them. We should not be sitting up here saying that these people are minorities, these people are this, because the more you put labels on people, that's the way you plan on treating those people when you happen to deal with them. My being an African American also encompassed the fact that I'm also part white too. If you go and look at my ancestry situation, we've had white people in our race, and black people in our race, Hispanic people in our race. So we are multicultural people. We're not just one type race of a person. Most of us are not, especially from America. So I really feel that we should start to sit at the table and try to understand each other, as opposed to tearing each other up.
Thank you for those perspectives, Deborah. I did see that Carl and Imzak had their hand up, but I also want to just alert that we're at the 20-minute mark. I do want to get to at least one more question. So Carl and Imzak, if you have something to add, I would ask if you can specifically point to tangible, actionable things that we can, that you can suggest that the task force should consider when, again, this is going to be about crafting policy that will then lead to actual change in laws and procedures. So the more we can kind of concentrate our comments around tangible items, I think it's going to be more fruitful for the task force. I do have a slew of questions here. We're not going to be able to get to a lot of them. Some of my questions point to some of the issues that were mentioned on this call as far as the interagency work that could or needs to be better as far as mental health and drug rehabilitation working in conjunction with police. So I will send this whole through the mayor's office tomorrow. And if anyone feels compelled to write a more thorough response to all of them, I think the information can be very helpful. So with that, Carl, Imzak, I want to come back to you too. And again, if you can try to just, in these last few minutes that we're on the call, try to narrow into to helpful suggestions that the task force can actually carry forward into the report.
Okay. Yeah, I only wanted to add that on the police force, I feel that if we're able to add more social workers to the actual force, like they have different training, but they're added to the force, and on top of that, they are of people of color. That might, in a way, knock two birds with one stone. You're putting people of color on the force, and they're also social workers. They're trained in working with mental health and things of that nature. And then on top of that, they get to add their cultural identity to the mix of what the police is. And I feel like that would be a big change in a way, to have something like that added to the force. I feel like that's the only thing I really want to add here, as in terms of something that we could add that could help things.
Thank you. And Carl, I'm going to come to you, but on the last couple of statements I've heard, the recruitment needs to expand to include more diverse people, the training, the probation period that officers are given. And I completely agree that exposure to the other, whatever the other is for you, is one way to learn how to be, function in a more culturally competent way. So Carl, please go ahead. You have the floor.
Good evening and thank you. To Mr. Falvo, I don't know your official title, but thank you for your years of service to the Schenectady Police Department, to the Schenectady as a community. I appreciate it. But in response to one of your comments, the Schenectady Police Department, quite frankly, in my opinion, has an imaging and brand problem. And I think that speaks clearly to the issues of why some of the community events that take place are not received appropriately. That speaks to the continued instances where individuals who are affected in a negative light by the hands of the police department are not able to acknowledge or are not able to receive the positive or genuine nature of a basketball game or of a pizza delivery activity. So getting into one of my responses about ways that the police department can improve their relationship with the community, to me, it begins with trust, and trust begins with raw data and the open acknowledgement that current policies and programs are either ineffective or inadvertently create adverse counterproductive reactions. So I know that we've constantly talked, and it was touted yesterday during the PowerPoint presentation, although informative, to some degree, highlighted a police department that many members of this community have not historically witnessed or do not have the emotional ability to receive. So although these instances of generosity by the police department have genuine natures or genuine origins, we are having these conversations at this present day because of said police inabilities for them to actively speak or function on behalf of a certain audience. So although those activities have a positive nature, they have not been effective because we are having these conversations right now. They're either not effective or they are not enough. So moving forward to truly create meaningful police and community relationships requires beginning with data delivered in an easily digestible fashion. So not relying specifically on PowerPoints or not relying on individuals of the community having to search for it, but also accommodating the multiple forms of communication platforms such as virtual meetings, having town halls, or quarterly forums where the chief of police engages directly with the community to highlight where undesirable policies exist and to recommend adjustments that meet the needs of the community at large. So specifically in response to de-escalation training and practices, Ismek, I think his name is, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, brought up one of the topics that I wanted to address, which is mental health responses. So what I would like to see specifically, and speaking on behalf of the NAACP, is understanding where, if there is a line within the police department's budget for social working resources, but then also delving deeper into our current Schenectady Mobile Crisis Team, and not in a manner that is trying to cut off or sever their financial resources, but wanting to understand what they currently do for our city in a manner of understanding what more needs to be given to them resource-wise to increase their ability to speak on behalf of individuals within our community with mental health issues.
Thank you, Carl. And I would kind of just alert the Fin Institute and others that there is a bunch of suggestions, questions, and resources being populated in the chat room. So please be sure to copy those notes, and make that part of the record of tonight's process. We're coming up on 13 minutes left. I'd like to do a little bit of a lightning round. Again, I had so many more questions, but I appreciate all the engaged dialogue, but I do want to try to get, to hear from some people maybe we haven't heard from. So if we can do this in a little bit faster fashion, this is a simple one. Think of a traffic light. I'd like people to chime in with one thing they'd like to see the police force stop, start, and continue. Again, so think of those three words: stop, start, and continue. If you can quickly, maybe in a brief fashion, chime in with one thing you'd like the police force to stop doing, one thing you'd like the police force to start doing, and one thing you'd like the police force to continue doing. So stop, start, continue. And anyone can jump in and start. We have about 12 minutes. Maxine? Okay, anyone, stop, start, continue. One thing you'd like to see them stop doing, start doing, and continue doing.
Junior Hitlal here.
Yes.
One thing I would like to see the police department do, and I know they currently do it, they have 2 officers that engage in the community. And those 2 officers are really great when they engage within the community. I would prefer the officers that patrol the community to engage with the community, not 2 officers that we currently have that there's a name for them. I can't remember offhand what it is, but I think it's more viable for the officers that's patrolling our community, our streets. Those are the officers that engage with our kids, with the adults.
Thank you, Junior. So if I'm hearing correctly, from your perspective, there are 2 officers who have an assigned role to engage with the community, but what you would like to see is that interaction expanded to other officers, not just the 2 to engage, but other officers that also patrol the communities as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, because that's how you build a bond. That's how you build trust within the community. Because those are the officers don't live in the city. Those are the officers that works in the city, and that's how you build a relationship within the community, and that's what we need.
Thank you. Again, for the cues, stop, start, and continue. If anybody would like to jump in, we have 10 minutes.
Sure, I will go ahead. They can stop over policing Black and Brown communities, as well as stop living outside of our communities. They could start reallocating funds to communities. Take that money directly out of the police force, period. Not social workers working for cops, but community actual programs and services inside communities. As for continue, yeah, I ain't got one.
Thank you, Jamaica. 9 minutes left. Anyone else? Stop, start, continue. Carl?
Hi, I would like for the Schenectady Police Department to start investing in kids at a younger age. We've had conversations within the NAACP, which highlights that our youth, when they get to those adult years, have no interest in law enforcement careers based on some issues or perceived injustices that they've experienced throughout their entire lives. So what that does for our community is it leaves very few advocates with diverse backgrounds entering those fields. So what we would like to see is to have programs or clubs that are mentioned yesterday, similar to the one at the Schenectady High School, expanded to other schools within the school district, but at a lower level, to improve youth engagement and consideration for law enforcement careers at a later age. We think in addition to this, providing those kids and probably schools a mentor that would look like them, but in general, just having a mentor available to have these positive role models available to them at a younger age as they transition through those pivotal years of their schooling.
Thank you. Mr. Magoo?
Reiterate or piggyback on something Mr. Bravo said earlier is about the New York State civil service system as it pertains to the testing or the examination process for police officers. Somehow, if to ensure that folks of color get a better opportunity to be employed within the police department, approaching the Department of Civil Service to see if they can come up with a better exam vehicle to ensure that that more people of color are hired within the department. And I know it can be done because many years ago, the New York State Police had a similar issue, and because of a lawsuit that was brought against them, and they came up with a system that that ensured that they were able to help them increase the number of people of color among the state police force. So if we can somehow advocate, and it's a start, advocate with the state to come up with a better testing system so that folks of color have a better opportunity to be employed within the police department.
Thank you. Yes, William?
What I would like the police department to stop doing is stop overutilizing force in our communities of color. Something I've had a conversation with the chief and other officers about is, again, looking at the policies and procedures, the actual training before reaching our community. What information are they being given specifically to look at our community in the way that they're being looked at? What I would like them to start doing is, a great opportunity is to, prior to officers even hitting the streets as part of their training, having those conversations, bringing in community leaders, individuals from the community, getting to know the community, getting to understand the people that they're dealing with. And what I would like them to continue to do is continue to have uncomfortable conversations like this. Put yourself in a space where you can continue to speak with community leaders and continue to build on the engagements, some of the work that's already been done. Unfortunately, we're in a place where I don't think everything is going to be fixed right now. But with some tangible action items, which I look to see come out of this, and individuals from the community like myself and others who are going to hold you guys accountable to this. Again, like I said in the very beginning, I look forward to the work and the process and what can be done. So,
Thank you for that. Again, coming up on just over 5 minutes left, but again, stop, start, continue, or any other closing kind of remarks that anyone would like to bring to the space.
Hiring more hiring more people of color, recognizing and stop marginalizing people and giving people labels as poor people, low income people, minorities and that kind of thing, because as it has already been said, they're not minorities. Call people, be more personable. Recognize people as who they are, and let's leave off all this color stuff, because that helps you to be more negative to people when you deal in so much color instead of dealing in being more personable to people. And if you want to be friendly to the public, remember that we're all human. and that we want to be treated respectfully, and and recognize that what you're doing to people when you try to apprehend them for whatever reason, do it with respect. You don't have to talk down to people or treat people negatively just because you're there as a police officer. Show people respect. And then I think that people will want to respect you as well. And I think our police force some things they do well, but some things they do is not well. And if a person is in your custody, as it was, what was it, a year or two ago, the man said he couldn't breathe. Recognize that he's a human. And if he says he can't breathe, open up the window or try to make him more comfortable. Just because you're apprehending a person and taking them to jail don't mean that you should be inhumane to them because you're doing that. This man said he couldn't breathe, he had asthma or something, and he ended up dying in the police custody. Those kinds of incidents don't need to continue to happen. If a person says that they can't breathe, because you've got to recognize that people are afraid when they're in the back of your car and you're handcuffed and you're treating them this kind of way. Some people are sensitive and may have some underlying health conditions. So recognize that and let's be more sensitive.
Yes.
Someone
Thank
who's
you.
watching this live right now sent a message and is a community member from Schenectady. I don't want to say their name, but they said for Schenectady police officers who say that they're good cops, to recognize that if you stay silent when someone else causes harm, then you can't possibly be a good cop. If you see that a colleague or someone you work with, or you hear a conversation about somebody did something wrong or they did something to harm someone and you stay silent and you are not actively trying to change the systems and structures inside policing, then you too are part of the problem because silence is violence. So for those officers who say that I'm here to protect and serve and I care about this community and I want to do good things, then speak up and speak out. Look for ways to create change inside policing that allows everyone to be safe, and don't just stay silent.
And I just want to say,
Okay, Maxine, go ahead to you, and then I'm going to ask
Sure.
Michaela to come in.
It's just about changing the culture that I'm not in the police station, but I don't know the culture, but the sense I get, it's a us versus them mentality. And until we change that culture, we won't see change. So I think that's a place that we have to work on, just changing the culture and the mentality of us versus them.
Thank you. Michaela?
My final remark, I wanted to speak to a couple different points, and I'll make it very quick. I know we're out of time. I agree with a lot of what was previously said about changing the culture within policing. I also want to uplift the idea that we should definitely not be colorblind. There is the merit that is often taught behind the idea of being colorblind is definitely not what I think a lot of people think it is. Being colorblind takes away from the ability to see someone completely for what they are, recognize their historic background, recognize that they may come from trauma, that oftentimes in our communities, we not only come from the trauma of over-policing and of historic injustices, but also that of poverty, that of all of the other things that are happening in the world. So recognizing that you should see my color, you should see my culture, and you should respect me not only because of that, but despite of that. And that also gets down to the culture of policing. I have a lot of family members in SPD that a lot of people do not recognize. And I know specifically that there are people within Schenectady Police Department who do not like specific members of Schenectady Police Department, won't let them, get a better position or put them in specific roles simply because they do speak out about injustice or they do stand up. But then these officers are also commodified and used to paint some sort of, hey, look, the Black officers are in the community kind of thing. That is not the justice work that you think it is. Commodifying Black people while also diminishing the livelihood, or at least within the job of being a police officer, of officers who do actually stand up and say something when something when harm is perpetuated against a community member, that is exactly the thin blue line that needs to be cut out. The only culture of policing is that it perpetuates harm, and then there's a line of blue loyalty maintaining that we're not going to say anything and we're going to back our police officers. That is what has to go. We also should not, and I'm going to call in the mayor's office as well, we should not be giving 9% salary raises when people are dying of COVID-19 and schools are being defunded. And I haven't seen SPD or the mayor's office, which of course you can't change what Cuomo does, but you can push back against it. People are dying in poverty. People are being over-policed in their communities, and people are facing numerous injustices in the middle of the defund the police movement and the Black Lives Matter movement. Offering a 9% salary increase when we're discussing the ways in which resources should be reallocated is like a slap in the face to many community members, including myself. So breaking that blue line of silence and that blue line of loyalty, understanding that you should never be colorblind, but you should be color conscious and understand where I'm coming from and who I am as a person, and still see my humanity even in my Blackness and in my queerness. Those are the things that need to be changed. And there should be no reason that we are like discussing anything other than the fact that the culture around policing needs to change, and that we need to believe people who say they've been harmed and take lead from them. It doesn't matter if you've been, to another point, it doesn't matter if you've been taught why specifically police officers might use force. It matters that people have been harmed and now have trauma because of this. And yes, accountability is a big thing, but the accountability needs to be not on the people who were born into their skin color, but people who chose to put on a blue uniform. That's where the transparency needs to start. That's where the accountability needs to start, because people die every day. And we haven't maybe had as many cases as other cities or other areas or other states, but there's still Black life, brown life, Latinx life, and Indigenous lives and queer lives being harmed. So to another point, and this is my final point, I understand that a lot of people, even in this space, do feel safe around the police. That is because you are experiencing the privilege of feeling safe. So you have to have that uncomfortable conversation with yourself or someone who's willing to have it with you, to understand that policing has not historically benefited everyone in the same way that it may have provided safety and security for you. A lot of us feel unstable, insecure, and unsafe around policing because of historical injustices. That's what the conversation needs to be about. We need to take lead from those most marginalized first and start there. That's where transparency, accountability, and change needs to start and happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela, and I hope that on some level we've been able to do that today. Is have our minoritized folks take the lead in the conversation. Yes, Carl, you've asked for 30 seconds. Please go ahead.
So we've talked a lot about trust and transparency and open accountability. I would like to say, as a member of the steering committee and also as a member that's in multiple organizations in the city, we did not begin to hear from our community members until 30 minutes into this meeting, which put the community at a disadvantage. I think rather than putting that in an email that members of the community would not see, by addressing that in real time and then allowing them to hear that, grants them that trust that these types of, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a mistake, it's a learning curve, are being documented. And I would like to say on behalf of the steering committee that I will be putting forth that comment, and in hopes that further conversations are afforded more time to have these very important dialogues. So although we have had multiple weeks of preparation for these conversations, some things are going to inevitably be missed. So again, as we continue forth with these, I just ask that you give us the opportunity to make these mistakes, but then also give us the opportunity to correct them. And that was it. Thank you, Jason.
And I will try to do a better job in subsequent meetings of shortening my intro and allowing for more time for conversation, because I do realize that we had a lot that we couldn't get to, and we also had some folks on the call that we didn't hear a lot from. So again, we're 5 minutes over. We're about to wrap here, but I would like to say, first of all, thank you all for your time. Thank you all for being willing to be vulnerable in this space and share your voice. I think that, again, going back to my opening remarks, we're not going to be able to fix everything with one task force or one meeting, but we're all here and we're chipping in some way. I will send the full set of questions to the mayor's office, and folks will have a chance to look at the fuller set of questions that were prepared for this evening, because I do think there were a bunch of topics that we could have gotten to that I think would have been helpful for the task force to hear. So I encourage you, although it's a little bit more legwork, but if you can and are in a position to respond via email to the questions that I will share. Again, I think the perspectives and gathering those perspectives is very integral to this process. So, you know, if the chief or the mayor has a closing comment to wrap up here, I just am humbly appreciative for everybody on this call. I personally know many of you. Again, I just know where your hearts and minds lie in trying to do what we can to do and think better and be better. So I will wrap my comments there, and Chief or the Mayor, if you have anything to close
Jason,
out.
I'd just like to thank you and thank everyone for their input, for the time that they put in tonight, and as we go forward, because this is really the first night of formal discussions. There's going to be a series of these meetings, and we want to bring it together and thank the Finn Institute to their role in compiling this so that we get a product that we can all use going forward.
And I would also like to thank everybody for their attendance tonight and for their honest conversations. And I look forward to the next conversations that we were to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, have a blessed evening, everyone. I appreciate you all. If anybody does feel the need to stay on, we do have Reverend Kathy Gorman Coombs on the call, and both she and I will stay on the call a few minutes to see if there's a need of anybody who would like to stay on. But if there isn't that need, you know, have a great evening and have a great weekend.
Take
Thank
care and
you.
stay safe.
Thank you.
I did want to know, what part of Brooklyn did you come from?
I grew up in Flatbush and Canarsie.
Okay, because I lived in most of those parts. I lived in Crown Heights, Bedford Skies.